And the last idea of the diplomatic group, trade ideas. Trade ideas consists of shrewd commerce practices, free trade, merchant adventures, national trade policy, overseas merchants, trade manipulation, fast negotiations, and the finisher. The first idea, shrewd commerce practices, provides plus 20% global trade power. This is basically a 20% increase to more or less everything to do with trade, except for upstream propagation of land-based trade power. So how do you use this? Use this to get more complete trade control in a node where it isn't diplomatically feasible to eliminate the competition via warfare, to absorb all their land and therefore have all the trade power because you have all the land. Or when the use of extra trade ships isn't a good idea because you're running into naval force limitations. Second idea, free trade, plus one merchant. How do you use it? Well, you use it if you need additional steering or collecting merchants. That being said, I am personally of the opinion that you're much better off if you're after merchants going something like colonization, make a couple of colonial nations, or go get enough control in a trade company region and get the bonus merchants from that, because you'll get anywhere between 15 or 20 that way, whereas this only gives you one merchant. Also, never forget that although additional steering and collecting merchants are useful, that arguably the best way of making trade flow the way you want, the most beneficially to your nation, isn't with more merchants, but just to directly control all the bloody land. That being said, if you're playing tall, the extra merchants is useful. If you're trying to play a trade-based tall game, it can be useful. Merchant adventures, idea 3, plus 25% trade range. You can send merchants to trade nodes that are more distant from your land. So maybe you can't quite reach around the coast to Africa, to the Ivory Coast trade node, but with this you can reach that extra bit further and start driving extra trade, redirecting extra trade towards trade nodes that you're interested in. Something like that is a good example. Similar things occur in Indonesia. You can't quite reach Beijing or something because you want to go collect trade there rather than pirating because you're afraid of pissing off Ming too much. Things like that. Idea 4, national trade policy, plus 10% trade efficiency. This is a passive income buff. However much money you're making from trade will be increased by 10%. So obviously this is best used when you're making a lot of income from trade. Idea the next, overseas merchants, an additional plus one merchant. As before, I'm going to say that I tend to believe that if you want more merchants, you're better off going exploration ideas or something that gives you the ability to go get into colonial regions quicker. But if you're playing a tall game and you want the extra merchants, I suppose this is a good option. Trade manipulation, plus 25% trade steering. It allows your trade to be steered more effectively. Once again, I'm going to say, why care about getting marginal benefits to trade steering or other things like that when you can just control all the land? You're basically, if you control all the land in a trade node, even if your enemy has a huge fleet, they're going to have a hard time, a huge merchant fleet, they're going to have a hard time overcoming your land-based control to get trade exactly where you want. So I suppose this is most useful when you're trying to exert trade power in an area where you can't expand militarily very much. Fast negotiations, extra caravan power. This is basically the inland equivalent of extra trade steering. It is only useful for helping steer inland trade. But again, why not just control all the land? If you control all the land, the trade's going to flow where you want it. Finally, the finisher, an extra merchant, as if we hadn't been given enough merchants. And this lets us nag you again that if you want extra merchants, you're probably better off going some sort of colonial ideas, something like exploration or expansion that lets you build colonies in overseas regions so that you can get the extra merchant for having a colonial nation reach 10 provinces, or from having the dominant trade control in a trade company region. But if you're playing a tall game, a tall trade-focused game, and don't want to go colonizing, I suppose this is a useful alternative. And in summary, trade ideas provide a series of benefits for steering trade and increasing the resulting income you get from that trade that has been steered. However, the 3 extra merchants seem relatively weak given how relatively easily it is possible to earn extra merchants by other methods, such as colonial nations and trade company regions. That being said, the extra merchants are useful if you're playing a trade-focused nation and attempting to play a tall game without any colonies.